when it comes to incarceration in the country, you'll notice that our justice system disproportionately targets blacks and Latinos. You see it in stop and frisk policies in New York City. You see it in the number of Hispanics that the private prison industry targets, especially when it comes to undocumented citizens. So I want to read some of these statistics to you guys so you guys get a sense of where I'm coming from. So nationwide, African Americans represent 26% of juvenile arrests, 44% of youth who are detained, 46% of youth who are judicially waived to criminal court, and 58% of the youth admitted to state prisons. And that's according to the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. African American women are 3 times more likely than white women to be incarcerated, while Hispanic women are 69% more likely than white women to be incarcerated. That's according to the Sentencing Project. African Americans comprise 14% of regular drug users, but are 37% of those arrested for drug offenses. From 1980 to 2007, about 1 in 3 of the 25.4 million adults arrested for drugs was African American, and that's according to the Human Rights Watch. So you look at the numbers and you can see that when it comes to sentencing, of course, black people get 10% longer sentences than white people for the exact same crime. You look at all this information, you realize our justice system is skewed in one direction. So what do we do about that? Socioeconomic status is important. Professor Armour mentioned that earlier, and I want you to elaborate on that a little more, Professor Armour, because is that really the #1 factor in this, or are there other factors in play?
It's one of the factors. Certainly the fact that you have this disproportionate involvement in criminal enterprises by blacks who are disproportionately poor, but there's also another factor, and that is our brain on race. Our brains on race are not rational. That's what the cognitive science tells us. When they go in and they look at whether somebody makes a mistake about someone having a gun in their hand, they're more likely to make that. Jennifer Eberhardt up at Stanford has found if they're black than if they're white. And if they're dark-skinned, they're even more likely to make the mistake. The darker you are, and Obama is not treated the same as a Wesley Snipes. Okay, in terms of people's fear of him, how they process him, and whether they're going to respond to him with deadly force. So the question, there's another kind of set of problems here having to do with stereotypes, and those are rooted in the cognitive unconscious in this way. The little white girl who Phyllis Katz in the New York Times talks about, who upon seeing a black infant says to her mom, "Look, Mom, a baby made." That 3-year-old girl isn't racist. She's just reporting on an association that's been forged in her memory between women coming from a certain race and a certain social role. When she gets to be 18, she may renounce that as an appropriate way to respond to women, but that habit, that mental habit, though, is still there, and that can unconsciously drive her interactions with black. So somebody like Zimmerman, he may have been, even if he was racially liberal, unconsciously he was going to see Trayvon as more threatening than someone white, unconsciously.
It's so subtle. It is so unbelievably subtle. What happens to me on a regular basis, I'll be on the phone discussing something, not use my name, so the people have, the person has no idea who I am. When I meet them in person, the shock. And I've had it said to me, "Oh my God, I never thought you were black." So that's how subtle it is, and that will take generations to deal with and to discuss, if we choose to discuss it. But that's how subtle, and then how it mushrooms into George Zimmerman, who isn't even white, shooting a young African-American boy.
So let's discuss that for a second, because I think that there's a notion that in order to be racist, you have to be white, but that's not true. I mean, I feel that there's even discrimination within the African-American community when it comes to the shade of your skin.
Well,
like if you're,
the paper brown bag.
So let's discuss that a little bit. Is that something that has been addressed at all within the black community?
Oh no, they've done the studies on this. You know, as I mentioned with Jennifer Eberhardt, if you're darker, you're going to get a harder time, both in the community and out of the community. Even within the community, you look at who are the people who we put up as our models of beauty. You know, they tend to look like us more than darker-skinned people.
Very pleasing shades. Go ahead.
Well,
but in terms of fairly representing the entire group and having them spread in the media and elsewhere,
but
you know,
it's the whole argument of the house nigger and the South.
Yes.
I mean, that's how it all. That's for us, for our historical background.
Who picked up on that same distinction? Chris Rock, I think, in a negative way when he said, "I love black people, but I hate niggas." And
that's right.
Niggas, any black person who does crime, and aren't we talking about crime and criminals today? Is he saying that all those young black brothers are niggas?
Thank you very much.
Yes, that's the logic.
That's the problem I have with that
Okay.
Okay, but that's not the word. That's his use of the word. That's the division that he came up. Randall Kennedy at Harvard Law School, black prof there, said we need to distinguish between good Negroes and bad Negroes. So he didn't use the N word, but he came to the same distinction so that we can enhance our respectability in the eyes of whites.
But Ann is completely correct. We, as African Americans, as I've said before, there needs to be a forum, a daily forum, where we talk about this, because we need to clean up our house and clean it up, and then maybe we'll be allowed to point fingers. We can maybe do it simultaneously, but we don't talk about this in an honest
but
forum.
Then you get into it's just easier to point fingers. It's like, well, we can either turn on ourselves or turn on everybody else. It's human nature to just go like, well, I'm not turning on me.
We can do it simultaneously, and we
don't.
don't.
Approach it as a public health problem, saying we're part of the public, so we have the same problem that the rest of the public has. Public health.
So we don't have any laws that force segregation, but I feel that we do segregation on our own these days, and that makes it really difficult to address race relations, because we choose to hang out. I mean, study after study indicates that we choose to hang out with people that look like us, that are just like us. I mean, I'm even guilty of it. If you look at a picture of my best friend, the person that I'm with all the time, we're attached to the hip, we literally look like sisters, and I try to be aware of decisions I make, subconsciously. And do you feel that that's the reason why we just keep lagging behind with race relations, whereas with the gay community, we're becoming more accepting because we're realizing that our peers are gay. Our peers aren't, it's not either straight or gay. They're somewhere on the sexuality spectrum.
There's no mandate any longer about race relations. When I was growing up, there were mandates, there were federal laws, there were interventions, there was even guilt. There is no mandate for this any longer, and the younger you are, the less compelled you feel to have an integrated life. There's no mandate.
So you feel that there should be a mandate?
Yes.
And how would that mandate? How would you carry that mandate out? What would it be like?
Almost forced interaction.
Interesting.
How?
Okay.
Give me one.
Well, it was called affirmative action. It was called affirmative action.
With that, and I'm at USC now, and I see this with the students. They self-segregate, and we know this. The students, when you're no longer a student in your professional life, you self-segregate. We worship, but with ourselves and not with other kinds of people. We do everything with ourselves. That's not, a lot of times there aren't good reasons, but there may be one good reason when it comes to students that my students have explained to me. Claude Steele, who's the president of Columbia University now, said if you want to understand stereotype vulnerability, imagine being a white person having a conversation with an engagé black, let's say Jesse Jackson. You'd be watching every word you said for the whole half hour you have the conversation, not to confirm the stereotype of the racially illiberal white person. You'd be exhausted at the end of that half hour.
I'm wearing an adult diaper right now. Because I'm so frightened about saying the wrong thing.
But it's stressful, right?
You get a pass. I'll tell you why. I read your bio, and I stereotyped you. I said to myself, this is going to be a cool white guy.
Yeah.
I stereotyped you. I profiled you. I racially profiled you.
And then you met him and you realized you were
I was
wrong.
wrong off the air, and then you see what an embarrassment I am. But how do you? I think we self-segregate because people look like our family. If you're at home, everyone looks a certain way, and then you go, I'm going to just sit with the people that I'm used to.
When I talk about being forced, African Americans, I'll just generalize and say African Americans, but I'm including all races, but all minority races, but African Americans are forced to interact with white. On television, going shopping, we are forced to interact. White people are not.
Yeah.
You can live a whole lifetime as a white person and not really have to interact in a significant way with a person of color.
Yeah. I mean, there are people that don't leave their neighborhood. Right. There are black people, white people that don't leave the neighborhood. But yeah, you're right. Because basically it's a white society. Correct. If you want to go, if you want to enter society at large, you're entering white society.